We bring in a ESPN business analyst for the NFL, former Eagle front office member, MMQB. Andrew Brandt joins me here on the Sports Bash 97.3. Andrew, welcome. How are you, pal?
I'm doing well. Good to be with you guys as always.
Well, we always have some interesting topics when you're involved, and this one is a very interesting one because Sam Bradford, he is claiming the Eagles lied to him. Now, I guess the one question would be, do the Eagles owe it to Bird to explain their draft intentions?
No, and certainly you don't expect that to happen after you signed or any time going forward. I guess the question really comes down to, and it's all going to be devil in the details, but what exactly happened when he signed in February or March, whenever that was, when he signed this $36 million contract that's really kind of a 1 year, $18 million with $4 million guaranteed next year. Was the question asked, what are you guys doing in the draft? We want to make sure before we sign and not go to free agency, we want to make sure, are you going to draft a quarterback high? And if the answer was, we don't know, we're going to do best for the team, or, it's all whatever's best for the team, best player available, then, that's kind of on Bradford and Condon. That's the answer that teams usually give. But if the answer was, no way, Sam, no way, we're taking a quarterback high. We may take one later in the draft to back up you and Chase, but no way. I mean, that's different. And that's something where you feel like, okay, they weren't really honest with me, and that lingers. So no obligation to tell them anything, but if they did tell them an opposite of what happened, then I understand the frustration.
Right. Now, if you're working inside a front office and this side of the coin, the front office side tells him, we are not taking a guy at 13 and we don't intend on moving up. I'm sure. Have you been in conversations where agents would ask you as a front office member, guys, do you plan on trying to trade up to get a position that my client plays? In other words, are you trying to draft his replacement? Is that a common question in a negotiation?
No, I think it just depends. Usually if you're doing a new deal with someone, this is pretty rare. It's like the Eagles would spend, a $25 million contract on a running back and then take a running back in the first round. These things are rare. So usually and I wrote about this and talked about this before the trade, I didn't think the trade would happen because when you spend a lot of resources on one position in free agency, that's kind of telegraphing to the league that you're not going to spend those resources on the draft. But here's the opposite. Here's the Eagles spending a lot of resources in free agency. Two guys, not just one, two. And then we're assuming all these resources towards a quarterback in the draft. So this one I've never seen something like it where you both spend a lot in free agency and in the draft on the same position.
Andrew Brandt's with us. Your opinion, everybody's opinion, but is your opinion, would Sam Bradford have signed with the Eagles on March 1st if they had the number 2 pick in the draft and it was known they were drafting a quarterback?
I'm going to say probably not, with a caveat, and the caveat is really what goes to how he got the contract he did. I'm assuming that Tom Condon convinced the Eagles or some other way convinced the Eagles that Sam Bradford had competition. Who knows, the Broncos, the 49ers, the Houston, whatever, because you don't give $18 million without competition. The Jets and the Broncos are looking at paying their starting quarterback $7 million. That's Chase Daniel money. So, assuming that Condon had other options, and we're led to believe that he did by the deal that he got, he wouldn't have signed in Philadelphia, no.
That's interesting take here. Now, here's the situation that Bradford is now in. He signs that contract March 1st. They essentially, from Condon's side, Andrew, have told him, or he has said, that they never told us they were going to draft a quarterback. Who now has the leverage? who has the upper hand in this situation? Is this Bradford, or is he kind of SOL at this point?
Well, I think he still has the leverage. I mean, I have maybe a different view on this than a lot of people, because in any negotiation, any situation, who wants it more, right? Who wants it more? Who wants it to be the Eagles quarterback more? Is it Bradford, who may still have other options? And I think Tom Condon doesn't put this stuff out there unless there are other options. Or the Eagles, what are their options? Their options are go with Chase Daniel and play the rookie, and or play the rookie. I don't think they want to do that. I really don't. I don't think the Eagles really want to do that. I think they want to go with Bradford to have some level of success this year and some level of get the team ready for a young guy. So unless I'm misreading it, it just seems to me the Eagles still want this guy more than necessarily he wants to be here. So we'll see.
I guess another question is a lot of the fans are saying to shut up and play. You're making all this money. You've already made so much money. If you play well, what's the difference? You can go someplace else and play again. His agent is saying he's not really interested in being a mercenary. He doesn't want to keep bouncing around. He wants to play someone long-term, and that's his prerogative. My question to you is, Andrew, as a guy who was in a front office, if you draft a guy number 2, can Bradford do anything to keep that guy on the bench long-term?
Now, it's hard to know. It's hard to think of what that is. I mean, they did structure a contract that they could get out next year, $4 million guaranteed, but it's offset. So if he goes to another team, he's going to make at least $4 million. The Eagles will get out from under that. It's hard to know what he could possibly do because we're not in. I was with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, you're not in the age where you sit a guy 3 years, especially number 2 in the draft. That just doesn't happen anymore. So it's hard to know what he could do. Listen, I think nothing's going to change. I mean, that's my opinion. I think nothing's going to change because, one, I don't think Jeffrey Lurie is going to pay this guy $11 million to go play for someone else. And I know money, he's got tons of money, and people say sunk cost, but it's flabbergasting to think that he got an $11 million signing bonus and they might move him. But I think the more important reason is what we discussed. Sam Bradford is the present. We know he's not the future, but he is the present. They don't want Chase Daniel or Carson Wentz to be the present. So that's why I think he's not being traded.
Well, this goes, I had a conversation with John Clayton last week, and he kind of indicated that Roseman is ahead of the curve in the NFL in that teams are now going to sit first-round quarterbacks because they're entering the league and they're not ready because of the style of offenses that they're coming from in college. And this is Roseman saying, we want the veteran to play for a year or two, and then we want to hand it over to Wentz. The problem in this situation, Andrew, is Bradford's not interested in being that guy for 2 years. He wants, because of his age, he's not Tony Romo at 36. He's Sam Bradford at 29, and he's saying, I don't have 2 years left. I've got more time. So it's a very interesting situation. But do you agree that that's a new way of thinking? Or, as you mentioned, if you're drafted that high, you're not sitting 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, again, how long did it – we heard something about Blake Bortles sitting the whole year. It took about 3 games. We heard about Jameis Winston or Marcus Mariota maybe not starting right away. That didn't happen. I just think it's going to happen. If Bradford doesn't play well, of course it's going to happen sooner rather than later. So, it's interesting we haven't heard a peep out of Chase Daniel because what he's basically signed up for is to be a backup for a long time, right? And you figure quarterbacks want to play. I mean, that's why they play football. They want to play. But if anyone should be wondering what the heck's going on, it's this guy. He's signed up to be a backup to Bradford this year and a backup to Wentz in the future. Now, he's going to be paid very well to do that, but it's just an interesting dynamic for him.
Yeah, and it seems like the Eagles want their cake and eat it too. They don't want to be a rebuilding team. They want Bradford to kind of get them to be somewhere in the middle of the road so that they can hand Wentz a team that is ready to kind of take off here. And that is where there's an interesting dynamic here. But I guess a question is, should fans understand Sam's point of view, or do you think that people have the right to say, Sam, shut up and play?
Well, I think, fans, my view of fans is they compartmentalize well. So they're going to be mad at Sam Bradford in April and maybe in May, maybe in June. But when he trots out on the field and has some level of success, now if he stinks, he stinks. But he'd be booed if he stunk, even if they loved him. But if he starts throwing touchdowns and all that, and he's clearly a better option than the other two quarterbacks, what are fans going to do? Say, oh, we're still mad about? And the other part of it is this. I mean, again, this is cover. I've been in this game. I've seen this before. The agent takes the heat. So we have not heard a peep from Sam Bradford. We've heard it from Tom Condon. Condon's been around 40 years. He'll take the hits. He knows that. And when Sam does talk, assuming he's back, assuming he comes in, he's going to say, I was angry, I was frustrated, I vented, I spoke too soon through my agent, I'm sorry, and I'm back.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that happens.
You mentioned the Rodgers situation. Now, do you find this to be different because of the draft location in terms of number 2 as opposed to where Rodgers was taken? Not to mention Favre and Bradford are two different legacy guys. Is this a different situation than that type of situation? Was there pressure to get Rodgers on the field? Could you not push Favre out the door? Is that a different situation than what's going on here?
Completely different. Number one, we didn't trade. We saw this guy fall to us because no one in the league felt like taking this guy named Rodgers and thought he'd be any good. So we're sitting there. And number two, we had a quarterback in his mid-30s. Even though he was the most durable quarterback in the history of football, there had been talk about retirement up and before that. So no pressure to play him whatsoever. Brett was still in his heyday. But at some point after 3 years, not 1, not 2, but 3 years, we figured it's time to get this guy out of the bullpen. And that was a completely different situation.
Right, but even after 3 years, it was time to move on from Brett Favre, who wasn't ready to move on. What does that say for Bradford's possibilities of holding on to the job for more than 1 year, right? I mean, realistically, Bradford sees the writing on the wall that he's going to be out the door after a year. Now, some people would say the contract the Eagles gave him initially should have told him that. But, Andrew, do you see the difference between a prove-it contract and a bridged contract, or are they one and the same?
I guess they're the same. I mean, listen, how many guys on the Eagles, they have a roster will be 90 guys. How many guys can you say, well, we know they're going to be here next year? I mean, Zach Ertz, there's like 5. So it's really like Sam Bradford's no different than anyone else on the roster except for 5 or 6, 7, 8 guys where you feel like, okay, prove it. I mean, it's football, and there's so little security. I talk about this all the time. It's not like basketball or baseball with guaranteed contracts. You know they'll be around. You don't know who's going to be around. So Sam Bradford's like everyone else. Clearly, if Sam Bradford had, we bring up these teams like San Francisco and Denver, whoever, if they were going to give him a $40 million guarantee and a 5-year deal, he'd be there. So he got the best deal he could, and I was surprised how good a deal it was. I continue to say that.
Yeah.
But it's good enough, and it's certainly good enough to be the start of this year.
I guess a lot of this goes back to, did the Eagles have to make this move up to number 2? Some people would say, well, the contract that they gave Sam, coupled with the fact that they moved up, should tell Sam everything that he needs to know about how the Eagles feel about him. So did the Eagles tell Sam what they feel about him through doing all this?
Yeah, I think they did. That's why he's reacting. But I think a bigger question is, did the Eagles have to do what they did with Bradford? Well, we just saw the Carolina Panthers take off a tag. What if they had tagged Bradford? Would they be taking it off? I don't know. I mean, I guess my answer is probably no. But then would Bradford sign? So it's good they signed him, because now he can't really hold out into camp because he gets huge fines and all that. But you really like to ask the Eagles after they pick this player tomorrow is, do they feel good about what they did with Bradford on March 1st?
Right. Yeah, I guess the one question I had asked was, if the Eagles had number 2, would Sam have signed here? If you flip the script and say, if the Eagles had number 2, would they have signed Sam?
Right. And I don't know if Sam would have signed. They would have done a complete one-year deal, which, again, this is kind of a one-year deal. But or would Chase Daniel have signed?
Crazy. It's as you said, never really seen something like this before. And I don't know that Sam is handling it in the best manner. I don't know that his agent's handling it very well. I don't know if the Eagles handled it very well, but this is what we have, and it'll be interesting to see what happens moving forward. Andrew Brandt with us, ESPN business analyst, NFL, MMQB, with some interesting insight on as the Bradford Eagles turns. Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate it.
You got it. Take care.